Hi everyone, and welcome back to this video. So what I will be using in this is linked down below in the description, but just to kind of verbalize it, this is the Caron Chunky Cake in Ballet Sorbet. I do ball it up just because I find that easier to do. I'm using a 7mm hook. This was part of a hook set. You do not need to get the full set, but this is part of like a set of different colored hooks and sizes. And then I have scissors, a stitch marker, and then a threading needle. This correlates with a pattern that I have listed on my Etsy. It's for a granny square blanket, but you do not have to use this circle granny square pattern for the blanket itself. If you wish to use it for something else, that's why I'm doing this video. But the pattern is linked down below as well. As I said, it's available on Etsy. So we're going to be starting out with a magic ring and creating one. And then this. And then I chain 1. You can chain 3. We'll be doing double crochet stitches. So usually for a double crochet stitch, you want to chain 3. However, for this, we're only going to chain 2. And you can chain 3, but I just find it easier to chain 2 for a magic ring. And then that first chain 2 does not count as your initial stitch. Again, this first chain 2, or I guess it's a chain 1, but it does not count as a stitch. And when you're doing a magic ring, you can do it in whatever way that's comfortable for you, just as long as you're keeping your tension consistent. We're going to do 10 double crochets. So this was the first one, and we're doing 9 more. If you're coming here from the Etsy pattern, I included example gauges, but your gauge may not match up with mine based on your yarn, your hook, your tension. There are ways to make it match if you want to do it exactly like some of the examples I included in the pattern. Like I said, in the pattern, it does not have to match because this is supposed to be more personalized and based on your own choices and your own preferences. 1, 2. So I count from, this is why I have the stitch marker. I count from the stitch marker to occasionally check in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so I forgot to tighten it on camera. Essentially, you just pull on that tail yarn, and then now, so you don't go into this stitch where the stitch marker is, but into that chain right below it. And then now you chain 2, and I'm going to take out the stitch marker, and I'm going to do a double crochet increase. So that means 2 stitches in 1, and I'm going to do that 10 times because we have 10 stitches. So 10 double crochet increases, which means at the end of the round we'll have 20 stitches in total. So again, it's going into that same stitch. And again, this is why we have the stitch marker not in that chain 1, but in that first stitch you make, that first double crochet stitch you make. If you're good at keeping track of the number of stitches you've done, you don't need to have the stitch marker, but I just recommend using it so that you don't have to be constantly counting or constantly paying as close attention to the number. And then that way too, you can just check in every once in a while with how many you've done. Okay, so let's check in right here real quick. And because we did the chain 2 instead of a chain 3, it will curl in a little bit. So if you want to avoid that curl in, you can chain 3. But again, I just prefer doing a chain 2. And once we start doing like the square shaping part of it, it won't really matter. Like the curl in will straighten itself out. But let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9, 10, 15. Sorry, that was a little off center. I'm still getting used to doing this on camera. Okay, so let's count this out. Make sure we have 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And again, we're going to do the same as in round 1. A slip stitch into that chain 2, not into the stitch, but into the chain 2. It's also why I like having the stitch marker there, just to kind of differentiate where to do the slip stitch into when finishing off a round. And then now for round 3, we are chaining 3. And then we're going to create our first corner. So this chain 3 does in this round count as a double crochet stitch in round 1 and round 2. That chain 2 did not count as a stitch, but here the chain 3 does count as a stitch. Okay, so 1 over, and then we're putting the next stitch into the stitch from the previous round. That first stitch from the previous round, doing 1 double crochet. That's the first half of the corner, chain 2, and then into that same stitch, you're going to do 2 more double crochets. And now you have your first corner. In the next 4 stitches, it'll be double crochet, half double crochet, half double crochet, and then double crochet again, and then into that next stitch we're going to create our second corner. So double crochet all into the same space, so it's 2 double crochet, chain 2, and then 2 double crochet into the same space. So I've done the first 2 double crochets into that space, chain 2, again into that same space, 2 double crochet. Oh, and we get a yarn change, a color change. So I've created the second corner, and again we're going to repeat what we did from here on for the rest of the sides. So double crochet, half double crochet, half double crochet, and then double crochet, and then you're going to create your third corner, and then double crochet, half double, double crochet, corner, and then double crochet, half double, double crochet, and then slip stitch into this first corner. I will come back and meet you at this first corner. Okay, so once you get to this point where you did the last double crochet stitch before that first corner, you're going to slip stitch into that chain 3, and then slip stitch into that corner, and then chain 3, and then you're going to make the first corner of round 4, and so there's okay, there we go. Okay, so that was 1, and then you're gonna do something similar with round 4 as you did with round 3. However, when we get into this first stitch, all of the stitches that you are doing for round 4 are double crochet stitches. You're just going to go around in double crochet stitches until you get to the next corner space, the next chain 2 space, and then you want to make sure when you're doing round 4 and any other rounds after round 4 that you do get into those stitches right next to the corner, right next to the corners on either side of the corners. So we're going to make the second corner like with the other corners, 2 double crochet, chain 2, and then 2 more double crochet all into that same space of the corner of the previous round. And again, like I said, you want to make sure you're getting into that stitch of the previous round right next to the corner. And then again, you just go down the side with double crochet stitches. Once you get to the next corner, you're going to repeat what you did for corner 2, and then go down the sides with double crochet stitches. Repeat again, for the corner, again, you want to remember to get those stitch spaces on either side immediately next to the corner. And I'll meet you back here once I'm here. If you, like me, are stopping out round 4, all you need to do is slip stitch into that chain 3 and then pull up your yarn and cut there and then weave in, which I'll show you how to do in a minute. But if you want to do a 5th round or even a 6th or 7th, then we kind of do what we did for transitioning from round 3 to round 4, which is also slip stitch into the corner, chain 3, and then just repeat what you did for round 4, which was 1 double crochet into the corner, chain 2, 2 more double crochet into the corner and then your first, and then double crochets all around, and remembering to do 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets into the corner space. When you're finished with your square, you just need to slip stitch into that first chain 3 of the first corner and then pull it up. You don't want it too long because you don't want it just hanging in the corner. Cut, pull out the working yarn, and then this is where we use the threading needle. And again, I keep my threading needle in here to keep it with my scissors since I use it around the same time as cutting the yarn. And then into the stitches, into the middle of the stitches, you're going to put the threading needle like so. And you can also do it in parts where you do like the top half of the corner and then the bottom half of the corner. This will just, for me at least, do it in one go. And then I twist the yarn a little bit to get it into the threading needle a little bit easier. Sometimes it is a little bit tricky. And then I just pull through to weave in the end. And I am not going to cut this because I found that it makes it easier when weaving the granny squares for a blanket, weaving the squares together for a blanket. If you're not making a blanket and are using this pattern just for like a coaster or another project, you can cut this off, but I'm not going to, like I said, since I'll be doing a blanket. So I realized I forgot to weave in and secure the center when I was doing the sunburst granny square, so we're going to do that right now. And what I do is I get the needle into where I'm weaving the tail end first. I get the needle in first. And then, just because I've noticed that for me at least, sometimes if I put the yarn in before and then put the needle in where it's supposed to go, sometimes like the tail yarn slips and I lose it and then I need to re-put it in. So I just put the needle in first and then the yarn and then pull it through. And I will be tying this off again just to, or I don't know if I said this, but I will be tying this off to secure it. I usually do like a double or a triple knot. Right now I'm just going to do a double for this, and then now this square is done. Real quickly, I'm going to show you how to change yarn. I'm not actually going to do it quite yet because I still have a lot of this left and I'm just using the same yarn, and I just refer to it as change yarn because sometimes it might not always be a different color that you're changing to, but you still just might need to change yarn. This yarn, as I've said, is the Caron Chunky Cakes in Ballet Sorbet. And just a little tip for any project, not just a granny square or a blanket. Let me show this part real quick. But if you need to stop partway through, you're going to want to finish the stitch you're working on, pull up the loop, and then put in a stitch marker into that. And then, because you know sometimes things happen and maybe the yarn starts to get pulled through or pulled down, and if you don't have that stitch marker there, it'll just start undoing the stitches you worked on already. And with the stitch marker there, it doesn't pull through. It might pull through like a teeny bit, but the stitch marker, because it's so big in comparison to the stitch you've made, it won't pull through. But like I said, I'm going to show how to do a yarn change. It can apply to any stitch you do, big or small. So what you're going to do, like you see, whatever are like those top 2 loops of the very top of your stitch, in this case it's the top 2 from double crochet, and it's the one that your current working yarn loop is going through. You're going to stick your hook into that, and then with your new yarn, I know it's a little bit hard to tell with this color, but with your new yarn, you're going to pull up a loop, and then you're going to want to kind of hold that new tail in the back, but hold it to make sure you're not like pulling on it too much. Okay, I stopped holding on it, but hold on it the best you can, and then work through the new stitches as normal. And again, I'm not actually doing a yarn change, but I'm going to continue with this for a couple of stitches. So what you're going to do, this is the old loop and this is the new one, and you're going to cut the yarn. I would recommend having a bigger loop and then doing it at a halfway point, like right around here, just so it doesn't unravel and unfray when you're weaving it in and when you need to wash the granny square, wash the yarn, wash whatever the project is. Again, this can apply to any project. When you're weaving this part in, you'll cut right around here, and then this will go out, and ideally you would probably have like maybe a tiny ball left of the yarn, if that, maybe less, and then that way whatever's left you pull out, whatever's left from here you pull out, and then you weave in the rest of like the tail that's still attached to your project. For the blanket that I'm working on with this yarn, I am only doing 4 rounds. I would recommend at minimum that you have 4 rows, because that way you can even out the square look. However, you can go 5 rounds, 6 rounds, 7 rounds. You can go anything above 4 rounds. But again, for this blanket that I'm working on, I'm only doing 4 rounds. And also too, you see here, like I showed earlier, after I'd woven in the end, I didn't cut it off, and I wanted to explain that part a little bit more in detail. So I do this just because when I've made a granny square blanket in the past, the first one that I did, I had cut it close just to get rid of that tail end. I'd cut the tail, and then when I was weaving the squares together, this part started to come out, and then the corner would start to become undone, and I would have to kind of scramble to fix it and get it to look right, and to get it to look like the corner hadn't just come undone when I was weaving the squares together. Now, I do not cut the tail end because that will help me. I don't cut the tail end initially after I'm done with the squares themselves. When you're weaving the squares together, you are literally kind of like just tugging on part of the side, and then you move to weave together 2 other sides, and again you're tugging on this, and again, like when I've cut the tail before, because you tug on it to weave it together, this just started pulling out.